did not study furniture design or interior design. First, I went to art school. My dad was a photographer, and everyone in my family was some sort of painter or maker or entrepreneur. But I wanted to be, I don't know, I'd always been interested in drawing and painting and sculpture. And so I studied, I have a fine art degree as a bachelor's degree. And then I got out of art school and realized that was not the world I wanted to live in. I had moved and lived in New Orleans, and I was working part time for a landscape architecture firm. And I saw design as this really interesting, creative, and sort of analytic, way to have a life, to not be a starving artist. I still got to be creative and yet still use the side of my mind that was a little bit more technical, a little bit more analytic. So I went back to graduate school for interior architecture, and I have a master's degree in interior architecture. And after I finished graduate school, I worked for about 10 years as a interior designer. I worked for commercial and high-end residential firms in New York and in China. And I actually was working mainly on kind of cultural and hospitality projects for museums. I did a lot of exhibition design, and I was working with these sort of multidisciplinary teams that were doing, storytelling in space. How do you bring to life the story of the Holocaust? How do you bring to life the story of, we had corporate clients too, so we were doing a lot of corporate exhibition, like experience centers. We did because I was in China, we did things for the Olympics in 2008. And we also did work for the Shanghai Expo, which is kind of like the World's Fair, how that evolved. So we were doing these super amazing, huge pavilion designs, like full of technology, really immersive, really fun stuff. But I eventually got pulled over into doing more work with the marketing team because I was really good. I loved it. Actually, it was one of my favorite parts of the design process was to take what we were working on the design side and try to translate it into presentations that the marketing team could present and pitch to the clients. And once I was able to do that, I got pulled into the client meetings. And what I started to see was that without a designer in the room, the marketing team would speak for the design, and the design got, translated into other things. And then the marketing team or someone from, the marketing side would come back and then, speak for what needed to be changed. And so the more I was there, I started to realize I could advocate for my design client or my design teams and get, the project built the way we wanted it to be built,
Mhm.
right? And not because I could understand what the client was actually looking for and then go back to the design team and say, like, here's what I heard. Here's what I heard them say that they were really looking for. And this is how the design can adapt to meet that need. And that began a marketing career that's now been almost 15 years. So I
Mhm.
went back to school, studied, kind of got a foundation in marketing so I could really understand it. And one of the things I talk to a lot with clients is that creatives, designers are, we're visually very good at telling stories. We do that in our work in space, and we can sometimes, naturally do that graphically, but that doesn't mean it's going to work as a marketing asset. So we can talk about that. I teach that in marketing school now, where,
Mhm.
I say like your creativity isn't enough. You've got to understand the strategy behind how marketing and branding work to be able to tell a great story. So that's sorry,
No, you were
probably
no,
a longer
perfect.
story than you wanted.
No, you were great. So kind of just backpedaling just a little bit because a lot of times I'm talking to interior designers or individuals in the space and I'm speaking to them about, you know, what was your family's kind of response when you said you wanted to go into an art industry? And oftentimes there's a little bit of pushback, but it sounds like you may have had a very different experience than anybody else. So just
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the chance that I imagine your family was like, go for it.
I like to say, again, my dad was a photographer, and my family was very supportive. I think everyone was very creative, and they didn't really advise me against it. I kind of was like, I really loved chemistry, also, and that's that sort of analytical side. I thought there was some creativity to that, but at the time I don't know, I wasn't I wasn't one of those kids who was really advanced enough to really see into the future to realize, and I also thought maybe I didn't have the best guidance counselors or whatever, or maybe
Yeah.
someone sort of knew something, they saw something in me and said, "No, you need to do the creative side. It's fine." um, but design just never came up for some reason. I look back and I've asked questions because I just, for some reason, it never occurred to me to study interior design. I guess it just was not part of my world. Furniture design, I took furniture design classes in art school. And we had, because it was the 90s, and I'm totally dating myself, we had a computer lab.
Mm.
And in the computer lab, we had Photoshop 4 and Illustrator. We were doing basic HTML, like web design. But I took a couple of drafting classes, which were in the art school, and they were considered environmental design. But basically, we were just drafting by hand, which was amazing.
Yeah.
But no one put that together with like designing buildings or designing spaces. It was more of a technical, and we were doing really beautiful kind of technical drawings, and for a fine art. But until I went to graduate school, and the school that I went to, the interior architecture department was positioned inside of the School of Human Environmental Sciences. And so I didn't really understand how, there was a creative edge to it, of course, but it was more it was about marketing and commerce. The textile school was there, it was formerly, the home economics school, but the interior design, interior architecture program was inside of that. So I don't know that I would have, even if someone had said to me at 16, 17, like, go be an interior designer, I think I would have been like, no, I'm an artist, like I think I have to go follow my, passion. And I regret none of it, because what I learned was how to make things. I learned how things get made, like put together. I learned about materials. I know more than a lot of interior designers about textiles. I know about, wood and ceramics and clay and, building materials. I know about these things from my art education, and I have a big understanding of craft, like what it takes to make something really beautiful. And I think that has served me really well as an interior designer. And then now it serves me in helping my clients tell better crafted stories about the work that they do.
So you often emphasize the power of storytelling and branding, which you've mentioned already. What are the key elements of a compelling brand story for an interior designer?
So, first, I love to say that your brand is a conversation. It's not just a statement, right? We're not just broadcasting, putting things out into the world. We're wanting to pull people into what we do, what we make, right? Our story behind why we exist. I ask clients, first thing is like, why do you exist? And that's a question a lot of people don't think about. And once they start to say like, oh, okay, well, I do this blank, blank, blank because, and that gets us to, okay, well then you're serving someone with a service, with something that you're making, a space or an object. And so your marketing really has to bring them in to your story by talking specifically to them, right? You have to be able to connect with them on an emotional level to be able to first catch their attention. We're kind of overwhelmed at this point with imagery and marketing, and someone's trying to catch our attention all the time. So the one of the first ways you can do that is to say, hey, you, hey, I'm talking to you, and instead of saying, hey, I'm talking about myself, because that is not really what people want to, they don't really care about you. They care about themselves, and so they really want to understand how you can make their lives better. And the best and easiest way to do that is to really shift your narratives to be speaking directly to your client, to their hopes and their dreams and their fears and their, all the things that they're looking for when they are searching, for design services, which they may not even know that they need. That's a whole nother conversation. Um, but I do have a formula that I created to kind of help bring together and make it more clear for people. Do you want to hear it?
Yes, I would love to.
Okay. I call it the E3 storytelling framework. And each of the words in the framework start with an E, and I'm Erica, so you can remember that. more easily. So it's branded a little bit too. The first one is, and these are, they're sequential. So you do one first, and then you do the next, and then you do the next. And you have to do them in this order because if you don't, just like, I see this in marketing as people sort of rush to, again, create that really beautiful thing, but there's no story behind it. And then it doesn't fall, it falls flat.
Mhm.
So these three things have to happen in an order. So the first one is to define, and they go kind of by hardest to easiest. I would say the hardest one, but the most important one is to define your extraordinary positioning. So that's the E. What is it? What is it that makes you different? Right? Kind of basic idea, but it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to get to. You want to, look at what it is that really, 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 and it can be several things. It doesn't have to be just one thing. What is that one thing that you're really good at that you can own? Could be your process, could be your, your education. It could be your team. It could be that you came from another career. It could be that, you have a practice that specializes in working specifically with a certain, like an empty nester or a young professional, or like there's something extraordinary about you and what you do, and you need to kind of define really clearly what that is. Once you define that, the second thing you need to do is start telling stories around it that are emotionally resonant. So the second E is emotional. First one's extraordinary, the second one is emotional. And this is my favorite one because when I work with clients, we get to really break down the thing that the clients care most about. And it's usually not, it's actually never, it's never a new home. It's never a new space. They care about one of what I think are five human emotions, core, like things that drive us to really like want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and or millions of dollars and years, displacing our family and, changing our lives in order to get to this one thing, right? There has to be a huge motivation behind that. And there's five that I've identified in our industry over the years. The first one is a sense of belonging. Are people really searching for that? Like, do they really want a space where their children can come back home to, right? If they've, again, if they're empty nesters or they are about to go off to college, they want to make a place where, everyone will feel like they belong forever. Right. The second one is to be seen and heard. Everybody wants that, right? But we want that more in our home than any place, right? We want to know that if people come over, right, maybe our parents or our colleagues or our neighbors, that they see us and hear us for the people we aspire to be. And the third one and the fourth one I see together is that we have hope for the future and that we want to, our life has purpose and meaning, right? So usually people who are building second or third homes or vacation rental homes or, seasonal homes, the client that is looking for someone to help them build that really thinks about the future. They're thinking about their family. They're thinking about, what maybe this home becomes a character in another another person in their family, right? There's going to be a place where stories are made. So there's a motivation for building that thing just because they can, right? And the last one is the idea of wonder and wonder with an O and wonder with an A. Like, how do we move through the world and make sense of our place in it? there's a big there's a big motivation there. And I see this a lot actually more with product brands like, you know, sofas and like imagine a world where like that kind of storytelling comes from that place of that emotional resonance of really sort of finding your your place in the world, like this meta, right? Or micro, like who are we in this like who are we made of stardust, right? And maybe our sofa is too. Like the storytelling that happens around each of those sort of five emotionally resonant places is where we start with a client. And typically we see that they bleed in between. It's not always like one specific one, but most of the time clients know they've had enough experience with their own clients to have heard remnants of what they know to be true about what's motivating that ideal client. And that's where we start the story building from. And so this, because it's sequential, we take what that exceptional, like that extraordinary piece, and then we layer it with the emotional piece, and that's where a real beautiful story starts to be born. And then the last one is um, experiential touch points. How do you then, and it's really tactical, how do you take that story and map it to all of the touch points in your client's journey such that they are reminded over and over and over again of what makes you extraordinary and the emotional reason why they should make the investment to work with you. So that is my E3 storytelling framework. And that is the one I teach in marketing school. And it's also the one I use with clients. But I find that breaking it down and making it really simple for people.
Mhm.
I know it's not a simple thing to do, actually, it's
Yeah.
actually quite complex. It takes a long time, but giving people the pieces like that helps them, especially creatives, helps them to really start to, you know, see that it's not that scary and that it's more than, it's not about them. I think sometimes we tell people like, this story's not about you. It's like, whew, it takes the pressure off.
Kind of, since you've mentioned it, do you want to share just a little bit about the Marketing School for Creatives, when it was kind of
Yeah.
launched, and a little bit how it might support our members in what they
Yeah.
need?
Yeah. So, Marketing School for Creatives is a combination of, I mean, there we have a core curriculum online that teaches how to create this story using this exact framework. So there's 6 modules. You can take them on demand anytime. They're video based. There's tons of workbooks and templates and all the things you need. And then, as we go through, we start with narrative. How do you build that story with words? I know a lot of people struggle with words, but I have some tips to help you figure that out. Once you get that visual or that story first, and then you turn it into a visual, right? And how are all the ways you can do that across your website, your social media, your, you know, email campaigns, your whatever, all the marketing, your collateral, everything you want has to then, be reflected in that story because it has to, again, across all those touch points. And then I teach to how technically, strategically to understand what marketing is and how it works for creatives in an easy way. Again, there's a framework where, I show you how at certain types of the experience of that journey of your customer or your client, what they need to hear and how you need to say your message to them. And that is the marketing funnel. But then, so that curriculum exists online. You can take it on your own time. But then we meet once a month to do workshops and office hours. So you can get time with me to kind of go through the things that are getting in your way. We also do these kind of big events. We just finished one in January, February called Marketing School MSC Live. And it was 25 people, different creatives from around our industry, talking about all kinds of things. Like we had, oh my gosh, we had 3 different sessions with photographers. We had one on SEO. We had one on Pinterest. We had one on, AI. Jenna Gadusik was there and she's done several for marketing school as a guest instructor. So I bring in just everyone I know who's doing really interesting, progressive marketing work. And I bring them in for a workshop. And actually, the Jay Mize and Kristen Moonjan from Fashion Snoops. I don't know if you know them, but they did one on the future of home, the trends that are shaping, the next few years, which was really cool. So there's tons of like tactical things in marketing school. I won't go much deeper, but it's really it's fun. So if people want to join us, absolutely. And if you don't have it, I can send it to you. There's like a webinar
Okay.
on the Marketing School for Creatives landing page. People can watch that and get a sense of what the whole deal is about.
So in this, and kind of going back to the question, so many designers struggle with defining their unique brand identity, and this kind of may be what we just answered, but just want to make sure, what steps should they take to clarify their positioning in a crowded market? So this may be a little bit of a different animal, so to speak, for sure.
Yeah. So, well, positioning is part of that first E3 that we go through.
Okay.
Positioning is sort of an abstract idea because what it is, and I use several examples to explain it, but basically it's like where your brand sits in somebody's mind, literally
Okay.
the position. So if you want to think about it like a grocery store, when you go in to buy cat food or whatever cereal or toothpaste or whatever. They are strategically placed in order, right, on the
Hmm.
shelf. The ones that are at eye level are there for a reason. The ones that are on the bottom shelf or the top shelf are there for a reason. And so, what you want to do is to be positioned next to the brands that you want people to choose you with, literally. So, you want to make sure that your brand has the right position. Are you a luxury designer, but positioning yourself next to a DIY market? Are you, right? And that then tells you the order of what needs to be fixed with your brand messaging, with your identity, with the other assets that define and communicate about your brand. But you've got to start with positioning first. And sometimes it's very easy. It's like, okay, I am a luxury designer that serves, you know, professional couples who are in their, Gen X, late or Gen X or early boomers, right? They're about to retire. They've built homes before. And you go really deep into what that looks like because, again, that position is different than a professional couple that is just getting started building their first home or thinking about, there's a different level.
Hmm.
Right. And so your marketing and your messaging has to make up that difference and be really clear. So you're talking to the right people, and so that you're also positioning yourself next to other designers that are doing the same level of work, potentially with the same client. Of course, it's competition. There's always competition. That's the world
Yeah.
we live in. But, it's, we're all serving, we all have, there's enough to go around. It's not
Yeah.
about being competitive. I think just being and knowing where you sit position wise, is good.
Have you ever, just curious, have you ever been in a conversation with a new client, working with them, trying to figure out how to tell their story, and they almost have that aha moment that they've realized they've got this niche that they didn't realize they were?
Every single time.
Okay.
Every single time. And sometimes I talk to people a lot of times and there's tears because people are like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it or I never had like this amount of clarity. And that's good. When I see that, I get like, good feels because that means that they can internalize the marketing. I've I've done a lot of also work where designers come to me and they're like, I did a rebrand a few years ago, here's what we've got, but I don't really understand it. It's not me. That means someone handed them a brand and said, this is who you are. And they never internalized it. So it never clicked for them and they never felt authentic putting it
Mhm.
out there, or they never felt like it made sense enough to really own it and adapt it and bring it themselves, like take it on.
Yeah.
But when someone really, and this is success, like when someone really gets who they are and their value, marketing is like so easy. It feels good to do that because you realize, like, I have something the world needs, and I don't feel bad about saying that. I'm helping people. And if that's your point of view and your approach, and you own that story, you won't feel uncomfortable going on camera telling people about your work. You won't feel like you're writing emails that don't feel like you. You're always going to love what you do because you get it and you've internalized it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good.
So what is one common mistake interior designers make when marketing their business, and how can they fix it or tweak it?
First. Always, always, always. We have to start with positioning and then messaging. Always. Because again, you'll get to, and this is, I know this from experience and I've seen it happen again and again and again. When I transitioned from being a designer to working more with marketing, I was able to do, again, I could put together a beautiful presentation. I could write an interesting story. I could make it look really good, right? And the clients, you always get their attention, right? But then when they start poking, and like, what is this? And how does this work for us? And what does this mean? And like, it starts to fall apart. And the same is true for marketing. Like, if your marketing's not held together with a really good foundation, with a story that makes sense to who you are and defines you in your position, it's never going to work. You're really just going to be, throwing spaghetti again and again and again. So the thing I see most is people don't have a clear position and they don't have a clear message. And then that their message talks about them We are your advocate. We are, but why, right? We are your, we create spaces that feel like you. Okay, but that doesn't make any sense because you don't know me. Like we can, we do this. Our team I have this, that isn't storytelling. That stuff needs to happen later after someone gets to know you. But your story has to start with defining what your client is looking for and what they really are thinking about, and then showing that you understand that and that you can help them with that problem, whatever it is and whatever it looks like. So, those are the biggest things I see more often than not is
Okay.
messaging that's not really talking to anybody and undefined positioning or unclear positioning.
Now, when it comes to Instagram and other social platforms, do you have any like must do's or definite don'ts for interior designers when they're looking to attract ideal clients?
Yeah, and I nobody wants to hear this anymore, but for Instagram, we are now living in a world where video is very, very important. Not just for brand growth on the platform, for what the algorithms are prioritizing. I mean, think about it. We're competing with networks and Netflix, and just video is our entertainment platform of choice. Not that that means you have to be out creating a ton and ton and ton of video. But if there's some way to make, your images move or to use animated text or to create, galleries, create, just reels with galleries of imagery, that's going to be, you know, one of the tools to grow more on Instagram. If you can get to a point where you are comfortable and you've defined your position, you feel really good about the message, you don't feel like it's, makes you uncomfortable, you don't feel spammy or skeezy or salesy, and you can educate people on, that thing you really love doing most. That's usually your extraordinary positioning. If you feel comfortable and you can get to a place where you can do that with video, then I advise that. But if not, it's not the end of the world. You don't have to. And I like to tell people like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's a lot of people just out there making videos that, they're putting a lot of energy into, which don't people are just scrolling past because they're not eye catching. They don't have a lot of soul to them and a lot of, and I don't think any of us want to be doing that. Like nobody wants to be one wasting the time to do it, two, losing that dopamine hit when it feels like it didn't, hit or it wasn't a success. And so there's just nobody's winning in that race on social media anymore. But I can tell you that social media is social for a reason. It's looking for faces, it's looking for humans. And so the more perhaps people life you can show that will also help your storytelling. Maybe it's about creating a photo shoot and showing, what the lifestyle of your client might look like. If it's not you, that's okay, right? Hire a photographer for half a day or a videographer and do some vignettes in your spaces or in a recent project or in a project that's coming up, or be creative about it. And if it's not you kind of starring in it, that's okay. But think of some ways outside of the box. If social media is the platform you're choosing, if that's where you think your clients are,
Mhm.
maybe, maybe not. But if that's where you think you need to be spending all of your time, then do it. My advice is your website is your most 100% your most valuable marketing asset. And if you had to put money into anything, I would say it's that, making sure that your social channels drive traffic to your website and that your website is this dynamic asset that grows with you. People, the blog is coming back, people, which makes me really happy. Thank goodness. And thank goodness for you. This is great. So, blog content is really key because there's so much AI generated stuff online now and on social media too. It's like, we all kind of know and we can spot when it's just meant to be for traffic as opposed to being about education and nurturing your audience. And so maybe if that's a more comfortable platform for you, then put some time into that. And they don't have to be long posts, they
Mhm.
can just be, short and informational. So yeah.
Do you have any don'ts or like things you really discourage? I know that may be hard to tell people not to because it would,
Yeah.
I imagine it may depend on the personality or even the niche, but
Yeah, I would say, don't chase trends. Be
okay.
careful about typography is a trend that can really come back and get you because, we see these really trendy fonts and we want to put them all over our reels and unless you want to archive those later or you kind of cringe when you realize like, that font has had its day. You want to be careful with that. I would say don't. If you're going to invest in social media as something that's important to your brand, don't ignore analytics. Don't ignore don't ignore the, looking at what people really like and leaning into doing more of that. That's really not that difficult to do and a practice to set up maybe once a month tracking like is how am I growing, what were my most successful posts, what was it that I was talking about that really resonated with people, and where did I get the most engagement, where did I get the most comments or saves or forwards, or shares, what is it that really people like, and how can I take time to make more of that.
Now, anybody who may not understand how to access analytics or even understand
Mm.
them, is that something you offer through the school or just part of your business as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we do. Through my services business, we will do social strategy, as far as getting that social storytelling set up. But when it comes to like monthly management, we don't do that
Yeah.
anymore. But there's tons of great people who do. But I would advise you, and yes, we do have social media, social storytelling courses in marketing school. It's changing all the time. So my position on that is, you know, follow what information comes from the source.
Mhm.
There's a lot of clickbait out about how to, get 1,000 followers in 5 days and whatever. Like that stuff's all, it's clickbait. um, but if you really want to understand you know, what Instagram or Meta or LinkedIn or whatever that platform is for you, what they're prioritizing from content, what they're looking for, and they're going to be promoting more and training their algorithms to look for more of, go to the source, go to Instagram.com and read their, go look at what Adam Monstieri is talking about in the, shareholders reports. See what it is that, is going to be coming up, what they're really focusing on, and then you'll know. But yeah, going into the back end and seeing things, it's actually, they make it pretty intuitive. So if you go into insights on your post, it will show you like, you know, and you can get a monthly report. I think you can do up to 90 days
Yeah.
reports. Yeah.
Now you've had a chance to work with some major lifestyle brands and creatives alike. How can small design firms apply kind of those big brand marketing strategies to grow their audience?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. I will say luxury brands, and I'm actually doing a whole series this spring on
Okay.
the language of luxury. I wrote a recent, actually, you can link to it. I'll send you the link. On my blog, there is a post from February called The Language of Luxury, the new language of luxury. And my point of view with that is, how do we identify what it looks like to be a luxury brand now? And some of the things I'm talking about are like, what is luxurious about type, typography and fonts and color and space and overall like design? And then what about photography and video? How can we know and take some of these, and I would say they're like the elements and the principles of design, how can we take some of those and apply them to our marketing so that we are for sure either doing an audit of our own work to see what needs to be updated if we feel like maybe our site's too cluttered or too, maybe it's not reflecting current, luxury trends, like how can we make some adjustments if you can't hire someone to do it or you don't have anyone internally who can make those updates? What are the things that can help give you a little checklist on what needs to be updated? What is it in your language or in the way, the site feels or the way your social media appears that can help you be perceived as a luxury brand? Luxury starts in the mind first. Everything starts in the mind in marketing. It Luxury is about perception. And so once you understand the perception of luxury, they actually did a study which I thought was fascinating. And we're all kind of like, duh. But they did a study with people drinking wine. And there was a group that they gave, a really, well, I guess it was the same bottle of wine. And they told some people it was cheap and they told some people it was expensive. And they monitored their brain activity and realized that the ones who had known or heard or been told that it was a luxury or expensive bottle enjoyed it. The brain showed signs of pleasure, but it was the same as one that was cheap. So again, we're always signaling to people in our marketing what we're about. And you have control over that. So make sure that you're conscious of, the signals that again, and the signals have changed. I'm actually creating a presentation for High Point Market for this and one for a business of home. And in that, I'm actually showing two examples of like, is this luxury? Like a Rolls Royce is a Tesla luxury, is the Ritz-Carlton luxury versus the Aman, resorts.
Mhm.
Like they're both luxury, but they have a different language to them that fit into a different world when luxury meant something different. When there was a perception that luxury held and still holds. Obviously, those are amazing, luxurious things, but now we see luxury in a different way. And a lot of that is tied to experience. And another thing to say is like luxury is about engaging our senses. And the more we can activate the senses, another bit of science here, the more we activate the senses, the more is tied to memory and meaning. So if you're telling stories that bring out people's senses, like if you see one picture of a kitchen or you see a picture of a kitchen with a family standing around a island laughing with smiles on their faces, maybe having hot chocolate and a dog runs in and then like everybody's barefoot, that vibe feels very different than even if it's the same kitchen, right?
Mhm.
So the perception of this brand over this brand is going to be very different. And the storytelling is tying into the emotion and the multi-sensory immersive kind of space that we operate in as interior designers. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
Good.
My full-time job, I argue with them a lot because they'll just post pictures and they won't really tell a story with it. And I was like, guys, you had an opportunity to share something about
Yeah.
what's going on in this picture other than this is a group of people at the house, at the Capitol. And I'm like, and why were they there?
And
What were they
yeah,
doing? How long are they going to be there? Like, I
that's
have
right.
37 more questions for this, but it
Yeah.
happens. Um, so, what are maybe the biggest misconceptions that designers have about marketing their services, and what maybe mindset shifts need to
Oh
happen
yeah,
for them
this
to
is a good one.
market successfully? I really like this question whenever
This
asked.
is a this is a really good one. So the first one is if my work is good, people will find me. I don't have to do any marketing because my work does it for me. Or ooh, another one is all my clients come from word of mouth. So why should I do any marketing?
Yeah.
Well, um, eventually the clients won't come from word of mouth. And eventually the clients that are coming as word of mouth might not be the right fit, right? They may be a friend or someone who is close to your ideal client that you've worked with in the past, but they may not have the budget. They may have a different point of view on design. They may not be the right client. Just because they come to you and your phone is ringing doesn't mean they're all going to be the right client. So you've got to be doing some kind of marketing. You're in control of that. Don't leave it to Instagram. Don't leave it to other channels. Like you need to be, I tell my clients, like, I know this feels weird, but do try to do outreach to at least 1 to 2 people per week if you can. And that is previous clients, that is people you met, whatever, someone through your community group or someone, your friend's friend knows. Like keep that outreach going. You never know what's going to happen. But if you get to a point where it's like, my phone stopped ringing, I'm getting nervous, y- you don't want to get to that point. Like, even if you're telling people like down the line, we're booking for September or whatever, you can at least keep that conversation going into the future. Another misconception is that marketing feels salesy, you know? And I say the reality to that is that good marketing is education. It's positioning yourself as a thought leader, as a helper, as a resource, as a guide. And the more you feel like that's true, the less marketing will feel like sleazy or salesy, because you're not pushing people to do anything when you believe that it's true, right? Um, yeah, overall, marketing isn't really about you. I think
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing
About your
people.
business and developing
Yeah,
clients and
it's
sharing your brand and your niche. And
that's right. It's a conversation. It's all about really getting to know people and making sure that they see you as the solution to what they're looking for. And yeah, that's the Mythbusters, I guess.
now, in your experience, what marketing strategies consistently lead to high quality leads for interior designers?
First, getting that position right. I mean, that will do so much work for you,
Yeah.
literally. If people show up, they can self-filter whether they feel like, oh, maybe this isn't quite right, the right fit for me. Your messaging will help with that too. We serve blank with blank, that
Mhm.
will help people to say like, oh, okay, well, I'm not building a luxury home. I will look for someone else, or I am looking for someone to help me build a luxury home. I don't want to do it myself. Your messaging needs to be really clear so people can, again, self filter. So you're not spending a lot of time on calls with people who aren't a good fit. Um, I think referrals are great, certainly. But again, your messaging helps give people the script for what to say about you for a builder or a realtor or even someone on your own, team. If they're sitting on let's say they're sitting on a flight and they're talking to someone next to them and they're like, "Hey, what do you do?" That could be a potential client. Make
Mhm.
sure that that person on your team has been onboarded to the messaging that's important to your firm so that they are communicating the value that you can bring and offer. I think SEO is super important. I don't believe we need to break our backs about it. I think, there are agencies that can help do really excellent SEO work, and I think it's worth looking into, but that is not going to serve you unless the front end design, this is like the back end, unless the front end design is working with it. I've seen also a lot of generalist SEO firms work with interior designers, and interior designers come to me and they're not ranking, or they're ranking for things that they don't want to be ranked for. They are paying a crazy amount of money per month to someone to do SEO for them,
Mhm.
but on the front end their site is just really like missing the soul. It doesn't have a brand to it, doesn't have a story. So SEO and brand storytelling have to work together. That has to be really strategically and thoughtfully well done. And then I think thought leadership. I think the more designers can speak on panels. I mean, I know things like High Point Market and Atlanta Market and Las Vegas and, all the shows are trade focused. Of course, our clients aren't there, but what it helps to do is, one, it helps you to build confidence that you are, recognized in the industry for your point of view. And then that is something that you can take back. You can create content around that your clients will then see, saying like, look, they speak to other designers because they're an expert. It's like, would you go to a doctor who's been published again and again and again for his research on neuroscience, and you have a problem, that you need a neurologist for? I'm going to that doctor because I want to know that they are caught up and, leading the industry with research and they're on top of what's happening, more than I want to go see someone who hasn't put anything out or published in 20 years. I think you always have something to say and it's great PR. And I think a lot of designers say like, oh, I don't need to speak at High Point Market, or I don't need to speak at these markets because, what am I going to say that other designers don't know? And that's only part of it.
Mhm. Kind of, you mentioned this a little bit, but talk to me a little bit about working with a marketing professional or firm that does have that interior design experience and familiarity. I don't know why I can't say that word, as opposed to someone who is a general marketing,
Yeah.
commercial advertising type firm.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, share a little bit about that importance in finding that right niche within this industry.
Well, I mean, it's like anything. Like, think about what you know. Could you build, I would say, could you build a brand, a wellness brand, or a coffee brand, or a brand of, for shoes? If you don't know enough about that industry, marketing is strategy. And so it takes really deeply understanding what, how, not just how the industry works, but what's the language in the industry, what's going to feel jargony and salesy, and what's going to feel like really genuine. And of course, you can spend a ton and ton and ton of money and hire a really, big super agency who will have, copywriters, and but you'll pay for it. Or you can go to someone who specializes, or an agency that specializes in our industry. And there are so many, and they're doing great work. Obviously I'm one of them, we're one of them, but there's a lot of people out there doing a variety of different styles, just like interior design. There's something for everyone. But I highly recommend, when it comes to SEO, when it comes to, brand building, marketing, website design, social media, there are specialists in each of those areas in our industry. And it will be worth the money to take a little extra time to get on calls, to vet them, than it will be to hire, someone who is more of a generalist, just because the ramp of getting caught up in the industry is not going to be as long. And will, and I say with guarantee, I don't know if I can say with guarantee, but I have just rebuilt so many brands and websites that were done by a generalist that didn't understand our industry and created what they thought was a really kind of great brand, but in fact, it never worked. The client didn't get it. The client didn't get clients from it, and they spent a lot of money. So I would say we live in a world where the internet gives us tons of information. So do your research, be an educated consumer when it comes to if you're going to hire someone to help you, because it will serve you to hire a specialist over a generalist.
And kind of follow up from that, is it ever too late or too soon to hire a
Nope.
marketing professional to work with you? Nope.
No. And again, when you say too soon, let's say you're just getting started,
Yeah.
of course, you're not going to have the budget. But that doesn't mean, for me, I feel like your brand and your assets, of course your social media, but like your website too, can be changing all the time. And it's like we live in a world now, it's 2025. If it hasn't been updated, I mean, 2020 was kind of a landmark year for our industry, truly. It changed the world's perception of the value of the home and the spaces that we inhabit. And so if you are operating with a brand pre 2020, make sure you are relevant in the way you talk about your work. Yes, you need to go in and update and change and make edits and add new projects and refresh the landing page. But please, yes, we are living in a whole new world that has very rapidly changed over the last 5 years, and your marketing should too. If you're just getting started, that's okay. Maybe
Mhm.
you don't invest, but maybe you take the time to educate yourself. You have maybe more time than money. So take, or trade with someone if you
Yeah.
know someone who does really cool, graphics or branding or copywriting. Like, you can always trade if that makes sense for your brand. But again, there's a lot of professionals in the world, and wouldn't it be nice to just imagine a world where we all, supported each other in the ways that we could?
It's,
We're
um,
5 years also away from it being 2030. So
which is crazy.
take that in. Is crazy.
Yeah.
So look at all that's happened in the last 5 years. It flew by, and really use that as a way to say, like, well, what am I building toward in the next 5 years? What do I want to have? What do I want to be? Who do I want to be? What do I want my brand to look like? It's really exciting to put I mean, to say 2030, that blows my mind.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, that we're already there. So, whole nother conversation.
And then the last question I have is, with evolving trends in digital marketing and brand storytelling, speaking of, where do you
Yeah.
see the future of marketing for interior designers heading into the next 5 years?
I will say there's four. First, video first. We already talked about that. Video is dominating every way, which and sideways. Personal branding will be non negotiable. I
Hmm.
think clients expect to work with people they know, like, and trust. You can't hide behind a corporation anymore. Most interior designers are smaller shops. So own it. AI and automation are going to be huge. Don't be afraid. They can really streamline and make your life so much easier, make everything faster. If you don't get on board, you're going to be left behind, guaranteed. And then I believe truly that education driven marketing that serves people with content that helps them live a better life or makes their life easier or gives them answers, right? We can Google anything. And now we're even AIing everything.
Hmm.
But imagine that search being returned with like your content, with your article, or with your video, whatever that
Hmm.
looks like. So think about education as part of your content strategy. Thank you so much. I have really loved this conversation.
I've
I really
enjoyed it as
appreciate you
well.
having me.
It's wonder I speak to a lot of interior designers that's kind of just their wheelhouse, and so it's nice to kind of
Great.
get outside of that box and learn about how you guys are supporting our industry so much. So it's been a wonderful conversation for sure.
Likewise. Well, thank you very
You're
much. If you
welcome. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful, I guess, afternoon and evening where you are.
thank you. You
Take
too.
care. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you. Bye, Lindsay.
Bye bye.